your instructor bill for. And what the basic elements of design do, the basic elements of design will enable you to design anything that you expect to be visually appealing, whether it be a yacht, an automobile, a motorcycle, a painting, interior design. These elements relate to anything that you want to design that you want to be visually appealing. So there are 10 elements of design generally accepted, although some people say 8, but for the purposes today, we're going to explore the 10 elements of design. And the first element of design is line. And line is something that's probably basic in graphic design or in visual design, because when we started as cavemen, we drew lines in the dirt with sticks, and we developed stick men and stick paintings when we were very primitive. And there are basically 8 types of lines. You have vertical lines, horizontal lines, diagonal lines, intersecting lines, perpendicular lines, parallel lines, zigzag lines, and curved lines. And you can see that even in this primitive state, these lines actually kind of suggest different things that we're familiar with every day. Like vertical lines are used to connect different items, but in this particular instance, you might think of lines on a highway that you see. It's lines indicating lines in direction of traffic. Horizontal lines that might suggest a train track or even a river with some flowing into it. Diagonal lines, we come to see diagonal lines, and we frequently see them depicted visually. And when we see lines like this, we quite often think of rain, because we think of rain as slanting, falling from the sky in slant. Intersecting lines, you can think of them as intersections. If you see this on a map, you're thinking of the junction of 2 streets. Same thing with perpendicular lines. You might think of a street that dead ends into another street. Parallel lines, again, lanes of traffic. Zigzag lines, that's a frequency. Quite often you see that to indicate frequency or movement, something that's not static, but it moves. And curved lines, of course, are used quite often to depict organic shapes or things in nature that are not composed of straight lines, because typically we don't think of straight lines as being in nature. Seldom do you see straight lines being utilized in nature. Here's an example of a line that we are all familiar with, and this is an EKG line. And we come to know now that when you see an EKG line like this, you understand that it mirrors a person's heartbeat. And if you're looking at an EKG and you see a line that looks like this, that's not good. That means you are more likely dead. So you don't want to see a straight flat line. A flat line indicates no movement. If you're looking at a picture of a lake and the lake has a surface like this, you know that the lake is very still. It's not moving, it's static. And that's what lines can do. Lines can suggest movement to you. Okay, the second element of design is color. And colors, over time, we have developed what's called a color wheel. There are 3 primary colors, and those primary colors are yellow, blue, and red. And if you combine those colors, you come up with the secondary colors. And then you have neutral colors. Like, neutral colors are actually not colors, they're actually called shades. White is a neutral color, gray is a neutral color, black is a neutral color, and brown is a neutral also. And quite often those colors are used to in attire, like if you might see a UPS man in his brown uniform, or you might see a waiter in a black outfit. And what that does is, typically if you see waiters and fast food workers in black outfits, or even maintenance men, that's because black doesn't show dirt easily. And white is the opposite. If you see something white, it suggests purity or something that's unblemished by a dark stain. And so it lets a person know that this environment is clean or antiseptic. So you see nurses wearing white, nurses and doctors wear white because it's to convey a sense of being antiseptic or clean. Now, you also have complementary colors. Now, your complementary colors are colors that are actually created because they are contrasting colors. Like, for instance, colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel are complementing colors, even though sometimes you may think of them as contrasting colors because they are opposite each other. But in essence, they are colors that work well together. So you think of fraternity and sororities or football teams. They will use purple and yellow or purple and gold because those are complementary colors. You think of Christmas colors. Christmas colors are red and green because they are opposite each other on the color wheel. And blue and orange. There's a certain football team about 30 or 40 miles up the road from here that uses those colors. I will not use the name of that team, but I think most of you know who they are. And so complementary colors are colors that work well together. Now, you also have analogous colors. Now, analogous colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So you've got yellow, orange, and red, orange, and orange are complementary colors. And then you have red or cherry, red, and mauve are complementary colors. Or purple and blue and a darker blue are all analogous colors. So these are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, and they work well together because they are right next to each other on the color wheel. Now, the third element of design is shape. And we are also familiar with shapes because in our earliest efforts to depict things visually, we use shapes that are basically suggestive of things that you see in your environment. For instance, the geometric shapes. These are shapes that can be used in geometry, like squares, triangles, and circles. They have degrees and they have angles. So that's why they're called geometric shapes, because they're used in geometry. These are the basic shapes. And as an artist, you come to find out that you can create almost anything by drawing a geometric shape and elaborating on it, either adding some more elements, combining geometric shapes, and you can depict almost anything if you start out with a geometric shape. But then there are some shapes, organic or natural shapes, that are not geometric. And these are shapes that you find in nature, like a cloud. A cloud is an organic or natural shape. A leaf is an organic or natural shape. And the same thing with a rock. These are things that have irregular contours. And so they are organic or natural, things that you find in nature. Now, the third type of shape is an abstract shape. Now, abstract shapes are shapes that hearken or suggest things in nature or even manufactured things, but is showing you in its most basic and uncluttered and streamlined way. For instance, in the examples I have here, this first abstract shape now is these shapes become iconic in that they suggest something and everybody sees that shape and they know exactly what that shape is. So in this first abstract shape, that's using visually in computers to indicate connectivity. It's, in other words, a cable, something you have to connect, like a USB port. You connect one end to a charging station and the other end connects to your phone. The second shape is an abstract shape that has been used to indicate a human being or a man. Now, with a little editing, you can make that shape, like for instance, if you extend in the body or the torso of the shape, if you extend it down and create a skirt and add contours of some hair, then you can easily transform that iconic shape of a man to suggest that of a woman. And then thirdly, that abstract or iconic shape is a symbol that has come to, everybody sees that. If you see that outside a restaurant or library, anywhere, you know that that's a place that has Wi-Fi capabilities, because this iconic shape has come to mean something with Wi-Fi capabilities or the convenience of having Wi-Fi. So those are examples of some of the basic types of shapes. Now, the next basic element of design is space. And space is something that when you hear the word space, frequently we think of outer space, because somebody says, I'm going to shoot him into space. We know most typically you're not going to shoot him into the space of a room. You're going to shoot somebody into outer space. And that's an emptiness, a void. And so space can be a sheet of paper. When you have a sheet of paper and that sheet of paper represents the space you have to work with, and then you have to fill that space with something, whether it be with lines, colors, or shapes. The space is the workspace. So, you know, when you're using computer software, quite frequently they talk about your desktop space being your workspace. It's going to set up the parameters of how you have to fill that space in that design. But you can also think of a space, for instance, like I said, if you're talking about interior design, then a room becomes an empty space that you get to fill with something, whether it be furniture or drapes or windows. So space is definitely an element that you come to use and manipulate. Now, you got two basic types of space, and it's called microspace. Micro means small, and those are the smaller elements of white space within a design, like letters, words, or small objects. And then you have macro space. Macro space are the larger elements of white space, negative space between large objects like paragraphs, shapes, or photos. That word negative space, when you have space and you fill it with something, then that space that you fill with an object is the positive space in your design. But the stuff where there is nothing is an important element too. That's called negative space. For instance, in this FedEx design, you see the FedEx logo and you see the words FedEx, but most people miss that in the word X, there's an arrow there. That arrow, that white arrow, if you look directly at the space between the E and the X, you see a white arrow. That's to symbolize FedEx is on the move. And quite frequently, people miss that, but the designer used that as a hidden way to convey the notion or the principle that FedEx is always on the move, taking your merchandise from one point, from point A to point B. So he used that negative space in a creative way. You also see here, this logo, this shows quite often in the elements of design, these elements overlap and they are utilized across different points here, because you see this logo and it's not so easy to see, but then when you place a background behind that, you see that there's a S in the middle that's kind of hidden, because the designer was using the negative space between the U and the A, that negative white space. He used that negative space to throw in another element. Now, likewise, in this particular ad for Tic Tacs, you see that the space, that white space, is broken up only by the red lips, but the negative space in the red lips is used to convey the notion of a Tic Tac. We all know what a Tic Tac is shaped like. So with just two colors. This designer was able to convey the notion that Tic Tacs, you put Tic Tacs in your mouth and they're going to bring you a benefit. So he used that negative space to focus your eyes on the lips and to also give you the negative impression, which becomes a positive when it's placed on the red background of a Tic Tac. Notorious B.I.G.'s album, Ready to Die. This album cover is a classic, and what it does is it creates a dichotomy, because you're talking about Notorious B.I.G., big, but he harkened back to when he was a little kid, a baby. And the title of the album is Ready to Die. And so what it basically tells you is that the Notorious B.I.G. came into this world basically ready to die. Unfortunately, sometimes you set your expectations up, and I don't think Notorious B.I.G. lived to see his 24th birthday. So now the next element of design is texture. As you can see, this background that I've been using to present this on, this has a texture. It's a texture that's scored and pockmarked, so to speak, and it gives you the impression of something that's etched. And that's what texture does. It conveys to you a 3D element that you ordinarily would not be able to get if you just use a flat surface like this. And it comes from our prior contact with these textures, that we see them visually and it suggests that texture. We all have come across walls like this that are weathered and have stood the test of time. And so if you use a background like this, this gives you kind of a gritty, urban feel to whatever the designer places over this. Sometimes you might, when I was working television, I might use a background like this to describe the rundown conditions on a certain part of town, and city council says they're going to do X and list those items, and that's letting you know that this applies to an area that has some bit of weathering or blight or breakdown and is not well kept. Same thing with this texture. This is something that's very rough, and because we have come into contact with rough and uneven surfaces like this, when we see that, it suggests that in your mind. Now, a person without the ability of sight, without sight, texture in a graphic design is wasted on them because they can't see it. Now, so what they have come to do with people who are visually challenged or blind, they have developed Braille, which gives them a texture that they can feel with their fingertips, because that's what texture does. But because you come into contact with this, a tactile element. This is a texture that suggests something that's been worked by a machine, because these indentations are consistent and regular, and we know that that's the sign of something that's machine tooled, because it would be very difficult for, say, for instance, a bear might make a series of scored lines with their claws, but a bear is not going to be able to make them precise and ordered like this. So when you see something like this, it suggests something manufactured or something artificial. The next element of design is topography. And topography, in short, is basically type or text or fonts, as we call them in design. And that's letters. Like, say, for instance, in this advertisements for the Flash. As I said, now you got lines here, and those squiggly electric lines mean movement. And even when you look at the Flash logo up close, he's using the zigzag to indicate swift movement or electricity. That underline going from fading from one and getting more bright as it goes along indicates movement and a blur. And even the letters themselves, Flash, are on an incline, which indicates movement. If this superhero was called the Block, then it would be ridiculous for the letters to indicate movement, because a block is not going to move. Or if he was the Stone, you would use something that was much more consistent and angular, like the Godfather logo, which has really come to signify, has become a typeface all its own. It was designed for the book and then adapted for the movie. And so what this does is, by using something stark in black and white, there are no gray areas in the mob. Things are either black and white. You either do it, it's either wrong or it's right. And then by pairing it with the icon of the hand and the lines again, which indicate connection, then it shows that the Godfather is the man behind the scenes pulling all the strings. Now here is something interesting in the design for a movie called The Princess Bride. This was a movie that was kind of about swashbuckling and medieval days, princesses and dragons and sword play. And so the typeface is very florid and flowery because it indicates that time period when they use calligraphy. But the interesting thing about this typeface is that it spells the same thing upside down as it does right side up. So you see, that's the same image, just flipped upside down. And they both spell The Princess Bride because he played, the artist played with the baseline. Letters are done on a baseline, and we know you got ascenders and you got descenders. But what the designer did here was he broke out of that pattern because the capital P, he's dropped it to the baseline so that it becomes a descender, when ordinarily, if you got a capital P, it's on the baseline and it ascends above the line. But he played with that because his intention, again, in design, you learn the rules so you can break them when it suits you. And so because he wanted this to be an ambigram, which is what you call words that read the same thing right side up as they do upside down. Palindromes are words that read the same thing from beginning to end, and if you switch them in the other direction, they spell the same thing, like maxim. No, not maximum. Yeah, that doesn't spell the same thing. But there are some words that spell the same thing backwards and forwards. That's called a palindrome. Now, I wanted to use this as an example to show you how artists and designers play with a baseline. This was a program that was on the old video channel, VH1, and they had a program devoted to R&B videos, and it was VH1 Soul. I was looking at this video one day, and all of a sudden it jumped out at me. I went, wow, that's a woman. That's a pregnant woman on her hands and knees. And the reason why I'm so sure that's what it is, because the first clue is the baseline. The artist took a letter like an S, a capital S. You don't connect a capital S to a descending letter at the top like that. So that was my clue that this artist, this designer, actually wanted to play with this and create a hidden image. Now, I know that looks a little weird. Y'all are going, how is that a woman, a pregnant woman on her hands and knees? There you have it. He showed, now this is an exercise that pregnant women do, yoga exercise. So he was able to take that shape and indicate, iconically indicate with the letters something VH1 Soul. Women are known as the nurturers, or that's why it's called Mother Earth, because women are nurturers and that's the source of creativity in life. So when this artist designed a logo for VH1 Soul, he wanted to use a pregnant woman, which indicates soulfulness or the birth and the mystery of birth. And women, that's why it's called Mother Earth and not Father Earth. But that's a really a kind of hidden thing that jumped out at me one day, and very few people see this. The next element of design is scale, and another word for scale is size. That's a pretty simple concept. We all know that the bigger things are, the more emphasis you place on it. And when I started out drawing, my dad was an art teacher. I started out drawing. The first thing he told me when he gave me a sheet of paper was, okay, fill a piece of paper up with something, son. Don't utilize your whole space. And that's a general rule of thumb, but sometimes you know the rules so you can break them. Like in this ad. This is an ad for a Volkswagen Beetle, which is a small car. So by using the space and pushing the image of the Volkswagen back in the distance, they convey to you the fact that Volkswagen is a small car. And the text says, think small. which means it's got a small engine, a small passenger compartment, and it's low on gas. It's an economy car. And so that's a way to utilize. If they had filled up the space with the Volkswagen, when you couldn't tell the Volkswagen was any smaller than any other kind of car. But by doing this, he's able to convey to you that Volkswagen is a small car. Again, this McDonald's logo, you're using oversized letters to indicate that, okay, McDonald's opens up for breakfast at 5:30. Instead of putting the AM in there, they use the McDonald's arches, which is a stylized M anyway, to indicate 5:30 AM, and you can eat breakfast until 8:15 PM. So that's a way of using the typography to convey not only a concept, but also convey to you who the vendor is, because we are all familiar with the McDonald's arches. You see this on a billboard, you know that a McDonald's is coming up. The next element in design is dominance. And again, a dominant element is something that your eye focuses on that can convey to you not just that's an important element, but also dynamic tension, a way to show you that this is an important element, but visually it's more interesting than to say something that's a lot more similar or analogous that might be boring. And there is no right or wrong position for a dominant element, but the different impressions created by it should be understood. For instance, in this photograph, you see these boats. Now, all the boats are around the same size, and that's a pleasant enough photograph, but it's kind of boring because they're all the same size. Now, if you take one of the boats and make it a little larger, then it creates dynamic tension, and that makes the image more visually appealing because your eye is drawn to the larger boat, and it stands out, and it doesn't create that sameness. Now, another way he was able to create dominance in his boat, the designer eventually decided to change the color of the boat from an analogous color, because all the other colors, with the exception of the red boat on the left, were kind of in the blue, or they're neutral. By making that red and a larger boat, that boat becomes the dominant element in this design. And that makes it a more appealing design because it creates movement with your eyes and it's not as boring. The next element is balance. Now, balance, as we all know, you talk about balance, you talk about the balance beam in gymnastics. You know, you want to have your weight evenly distributed. So in balance, you have what's called symmetry, and you have asymmetry. And symmetry is everything being balanced evenly. Now, you know, in words, if you have a word like typical and you put a in front of it, that means it's atypical, which means it's not typical. So a, sometimes used as a prefix, makes you understand that this is something that's not. Like typical, if you want to be atypical, that means you're not like everybody else. If you're a theist and you don't believe in God, then you are an atheist because you don't believe in God. Something might be pathetic, but then if you don't care about something, pathetic is something that creates pathos or care for it. But if you're not creating apathy or passion for something, then it's called being apathetic or apathetic. And in this COVID-19 world, we hear people talk about being symptomatic, or if you don't show your symptoms, then you're asymptomatic. So again, it's the same way with symmetry and asymmetry. Now, this shows something that's symmetrical on the left. This is a symmetrical design. It mirrors. The left side mirrors the right side, and they only change the colors to create some dynamic tension. But for the most part, this is a symmetrical design. Now, something that's asymmetrical, you see is using the same colors and basically the same shapes, but they're in an arrangement where one side does not mirror the other. And it creates a more dynamically tension or a dynamic oppositional image that creates more eye movement. And in some ways it might be unsettling because it doesn't indicate serenity. Now, you also have radial symmetry. And radial symmetry, anytime you hear the word radial, like a radial tire or the radius of a circle, you know it's circular. So in radial symmetry, you take something and you rotate it in the quadrants of a circle in a circular clockwise pattern. And you can take something radial and achieve radial symmetry by even taking something that's asymmetrical, like in the design we showed before. Now this is the design on the right. We take that asymmetrical design and move it through the quadrants of a clock and rotate it, and then you end up with an overall image that's symmetrical in a radial way because you circulated these items in the quadrants of a clock in a circle. And quite often you find that in nature, like a rose or a tree even. If you look at the top of a tree, it's in a circular way and it's composed of all these branches and leaves. They go in different, but it creates kind of a radial symmetry. Or a pineapple, something that's created in a circle that creates a symmetry by being circular in its pattern. Now, the final element of design is called harmony. Now, harmony is the main goal of visual design, and that's achieved by combining adjacent colors. Those are colors that are analogous to next to each other on the color wheel, like yellow, orange, and red. Similar shapes. You take these are basically geometric shapes that are placed together, and they only change the colors, but it creates a harmonious design. Or you have related textures, like in a hardwood floor. Now, a hardwood floor is composed of different grains. None of the grains are the same, but because they are similar in their asymmetry and similar in their color scheme, which is brown, then you get an overall impression when you see a hardwood floor, it's pleasing to the eye because those related textures create an overall design that's symmetrical or harmonious in its asymmetry again. Like in this design, he uses oval shapes, similar shapes and similar colors. In this design, the artist uses those squiggly lines which indicate electricity or movement, and the colors indicate heat radiating. So that's another way to do that. And then in this final design, you have something that's very manufactured, but you create kind of an interwoven pattern. If you kind of look back on this and kind of take your eyes out of focus, it looks like the cable knit in a sweater or herringbone design in a garment. So by doing that, by interweaving the shapes, he takes something which could have been very boring and non-dynamic, and by interweaving it like this, he creates something that's harmoniously, visually pleasing to the eye. So there you have your basic elements of design: line, color, shape, space, texture, topography, scale, dominance, balance, and harmony. Now, you guys, at the end of this 3-day seminar, you're going to be expected to take these elements and use the things that the other instructors have shown you and create something that's going to be visually appealing, whether it be photography or a short form video. But this is giving you the basic tools that you're going to need to create an overall harmonious design based on these basic elements of design: line, color, shape, space, texture, topography, scale, dominance, balance, and harmony. Now, to tell you a little something about myself, I've been an artist. Like I said, my dad was my first art teacher. He was an artist. And so I've basically been drawing and creating visual things visually all my life. I worked 30 years at WSFA Television, 22 years as the art director. And I use these elements of design all the time in my television work. And now I do freelance work for large scale public works. And I also use these elements of design. Now, this is something I just recently completed at the main library downtown. Did 4 8-foot by 11-foot walls. And I used it to tell the story and the history of the city of Montgomery. And this is one of the final panels that shows people who've achieved a level of nationwide prominence based on their accomplishments, from Nat King Cole to Hank Williams and Bart Starr and Jermichael Green and the young rapper whose name now all of a sudden escapes me. The award-winning actress Octavia Spencer, Big Mama Thornton, this Twitch from the Ellen Show, just Montgomery natives who've achieved some national prominence. Chica Oranica is a young rapper that I included, who I think is a name to remember, and we'll be hearing more things from her in the future. Now, this is a mural that if you guys are doing something in Trenholm, you may see on your way to school at Trenholm. This is in front of the Rufus Lewis Library, and this is a panel depicting things from the civil rights era, from the Montgomery bus boycott to the Selma to Montgomery march, and the appearance of President Barack Obama there in the year 2012, I think was the year he came. This is an image of the bus rap that I did to commemorate the centennial of the state of Alabama. And I found out that my original image, I had to chop it up to make it fit the bus. So it really didn't, personally, I was a little disappointed that it wasn't able to utilize, even though it wraps around the bus, you kind of lose some of the impact, because this starts on the left with the formation of the city of Montgomery and goes all the way chronologically through the Montgomery bus boycott and F. Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald, Dr. Martin Luther King, Hank Williams, and Nat King Cole again. They're particularly favorites of mine because I think popular music, all popular music in America, can harken back to these two guys. And this is really the detail of a design I did for the Jubilee City Fest poster back. This was the poster used the year before they stopped the Jubilee City Fest. And again, it was my homage to Nat King Cole and Hank Williams, because I think all modern R&B and of course all country music can be traced to these two guys. And in the center, I was including some performers, including two performers who were slated to appear that year, Janelle Monáe and Bruno Mars, but they did not give them the clearance to use the images, so I had to instead put the logo of the Jubilee City Fest in that center position. This is the piece I did back. This is a traditional painting that I did when I went and saw Malcolm X, starring Denzel Washington, the Spike Lee movie. You know, Denzel was great in that, but Malcolm X's nickname was Red, and Denzel ain't red. I'm sorry. And this is, I actually redid this image. A buddy of mine liked it so much. I sold that first piece to somebody, and a buddy of mine wanted a piece, and he works at Alabama State University, and I redid the image, and now that's in the permanent collection at Alabama State. And I recently did a third of the same piece, basically for my nephew. He liked it so much and he wanted one, so I painted him one. Now this is a traditional painting piece that I did using fauvism, and that's where you use unnatural colors to depict humans. You use unnatural colors because, of course, nobody is blue and purple and green. But that's a piece I did. And this is probably one of the oldest pieces in my collection. I did this when I was in college, and it won 3rd place statewide in a statewide show of the historically Black colleges and universities, and that's Diana Ross. This piece was a piece I did for the Selma to Montgomery March, the 50th anniversary. And this piece was very popular, and so we went to Selma and sold a bunch of T-shirts. If we had 1,000 more T-shirts, we could have sold them. But that's just an example of my work. And if you guys have any questions or something that you'd like to ask me about, we've got a few minutes before we'll start the next class, and have at it. And otherwise, it was really a pleasure with this. And again, you guys will be expected to take these basic elements and create a piece at the end of this seminar that will reflect the basic elements of design. And the next instructor on tomorrow will take you into how to take these basic elements and really translate them into something that's going to be personally representative of how you feel during the pandemic. So again, it was my pleasure to conduct this session. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be willing to answer them now. And otherwise, have a great day. Okay, Margaret, are they going to be muted, or are they muted, or does anybody have any questions? If not, I can get ready for the next session.
Hey, Bill. All the students are able to unmute themselves.
Okay.
And those
Well, I guess
things
that
are
means
down at the bottom. We've got 3 or 4 people waiting for the next class to start. So
okay.
if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to ask Bill.
And I apologize for the little technical snafu at the beginning. I don't know how that happened, but
It was me, Bill.
oh, was it? Okay. Well,
Yes, I apologize.
that's all right. That's all right. We got it done, and I was able to kind of speed up a little bit. I'm sorry for that, though, but and maybe it wasn't so bad because it gave somebody a little more time to get in the room before we started.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us. I hope you were able to hear everything and listen to Bill's or see Bill's beautiful presentation. And we will see you again, I believe, tomorrow at 10 a.m. So, all righty. Thank y'all.
Okay. All right. Have any students applied to come into the next session yet, or?
Yes, I'm gonna bring them in.
Okay.
We've got, I think we've got everybody.
We've got everybody?
Well, there's, I can't tell if some people are, they haven't left the meeting yet.
Okay.
So I guess I can remove them. Hi, Madison. Lamaya, can you hear everything? Kaylee?
That's a good water.
And Trey?
Yes.
Hi there. Welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're hoping that that all the people for the 11 o'clock, some of the they haven't come in yet. So.
Do you think anybody who missed the 10 a.m. group might want to join the 11 a.m. group since they missed the 10? That might
That's fine with us. I mean,
right. That might happen too. So I guess that's acceptable.
okay, we've got Lamaya. Are you there? Bill, I'm gonna text some of the kids to see if, or chat with them and see if I can make sure they can hear us and
Okay.
can see your screen. And Trey, you said you can hear?
Yes.
Okay. And
I can
then
hear you.
Madison Williams, can you
I
hear
can hear
everything?
you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kaylee, or am I saying that right?
Kalia?
Kalia, I'm
Kalia.
sorry, Kalia. Hi. You can hear okay and you can see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. All right. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we've got 4 of our 11 o'clock group, Bill. Do
Okay.
you want to wait a few minutes? You can talk to these guys a little bit before we get started.
Yeah. I just want to welcome you guys to this lecture, this seminar, and hopefully the information that I present to you today will be helpful in you composing a piece at the end of the seminar that will reflect what you're feeling and what you're going through and how you observe your environment as we're going through these frankly troubled times. And it's kind of going to be like a sketchbook, maybe an electronic or visual sketchbook of how you interpret this environment, which is unprecedented. I'm an old geezer, and this is certainly something that I've never seen in my lifetime. And frankly, I am just amazed at the ability of young people to absorb things that are so completely contrary to what we have become to know as normal, and persevere and excel in the midst of it. Even the current upheaval we're going through in the country concerning Black Lives Matter and trying to reform police departments, and it's been a seismic sea change, much like the Me Too movement, in how it changed the way people view sexual harassment in the workplace, or in how males tended to use their positions of authority to exploit and in some cases subjugate women. So it is with the Black Lives Matter movement, in that it's changing. I mean, there'll be no more Aunt Jemima, no more Uncle Ben. And in itself, when you're talking about design and advertising, these stereotypes go a long way into how people might interpret people of color. You know, Uncle Ben, you know, it's like some old black man that's making rice for us, or even Aunt Jemima, you know, it's the stereotype of the overweight black cook. These things are being jettisoned because people are beginning to understand that they perpetuate stereotypes. And advertisement and design is very, very instrumental in setting people's attitudes and notions of beauty and place in society. So I hope at the end of this and the subsequent 2 days that you'll be going through these seminars with the other instructors, Lana Taylor and Winfred Hawkins, you'll be able to use the elements of design to effectively convey what you're feeling and what you're going through. Now, I guess that I do know that you'll be expected to do this either with a visual notebook or maybe even making a short video, and the Armory will post them online so your friends and relatives and neighbors can see your expression. You're expressing yourself, because that's what visual design and graphics is all about, is expressing an idea in the most efficient and time-saving manner to convey to people what you're feeling. So, and that's what design is all about. So we got a couple of minutes, 11:15. Have we exceeded our original 4 students? We got any more, or is that still all we got?
Bill, we've got 9 or 8, so
Okay.
I think we can if you want to wait just a couple more minutes to see if we get a couple more students.
We'll, just like in the last session, we'll start at 15 minutes after the hour, and that'll give everybody time to get settled in. Maybe some people are having trouble signing on.
Yes, I think maybe.
Yeah, but that's cool. That's cool. Great. Great. And forgive me for doing this, kids and young people, but being a longtime native of Montgomery, I'm always looking at names and thinking Kiana Webb. I'm wondering if Kiana Webb is related to Vivian Webb and the football player that played at Lanier, Marcus Webb. I know the Webb family, known them for years, and Watkins and Smiths, of course. So I'm sure I know some of you. You may not know me, but I'm sure I know your parents. In some cases, telling my age, I probably know some of your grandparents too. I know some of your grandparents too. But yeah, these elements of design will be elements that you can use in designing anything, whether it be a boat or a motorcycle or interior design, or even in fashion design. You know, these are elements that you can use when you're designing anything. The elements of design, anything that's visual, that you want to create an overall visually appealing, cohesive design, these elements will be instrumental in doing that, regardless of what you're designing, not just a picture or an advertisement or a billboard, but as I said, whether you're going to fashion design or interior design or industrial design, these elements are just as efficient and germane in those fields as they are in drawing or painting or even sculpture. So it's about 11:15. And so without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this. As I said before, this is a presentation of the Armory Learning Arts Center, and I am presenting the basic elements of design, and I'm your instructor, Bill Ford. And that's a little caricature of me up there. I decided to include that. Okay, now the first element of design is about as basic as you can get, because it's a line. And almost every type of design is initiated with a design. I mean, if some of you remember your first day of school, they gave you a sheet of paper and a pencil. Well, at least I'm pretty sure they still do it that way, although it's been many years since I was in the first grade or even in kindergarten. They give you a pencil and you make lines on a piece of paper. It's real simple. And there are types of lines. You've got vertical lines, you know, they're straight up and down lines. And then you got horizontal lines. And then you got diagonal lines. And even in this crude elementary state, these lines all suggest something. Like diagonal lines. When you see this in an image and it's in the sky, then you come to understand that the artist is meant for this to indicate rain, because rain seldom falls straight down. Usually it's affected by the wind, and so rain tends to come down slanted, and it indicates movement, something that's moving. So we got diagonal lines. Intersecting lines, if you see this on a map, then you understand that this is an intersection, because that's what intersecting lines do. And that's, typically you see that on a map. It's meant to indicate highways or streets that meet at a corner and cross each other. Perpendicular lines, you see this on a map, you know that one street dead ends into another one. Parallel lines, again in traffic, you know that this is indicate lanes on a highway. Zigzag lines, which indicate movement. That can be a frequency, a wave, but when you see zigzag lines, it indicates an erratic movement or something chaotic. And then you have curved lines, and curved lines are lines that more readily relate to organic shapes or natural shapes. But these are the types of lines. Now this is one line that we all tend to become familiar with, unfortunately, because it's an EKG line, which for the most point, we know that that is to relate to the movement of somebody's heart. And that typically indicates that a person's heartbeat is strong. But then with another line, that same a line like this, you know, that's not good because it
Well, that's good. I'm glad it's not.
quite naturally is going to suggest that there's no movement, there's no activity in your heartbeat, and generally this means that you are dead. And so that's a line you don't want to see with an EKG. But if you use that same line to indicate the surface of a lake, then you know that that lake is pretty placid. It's there's no movement, it's serene, and the water is calm. There are no waves there. So you see a flat line can indicate serenity or passivity or a lack of activity or something at rest. Even if you go on with a sound monitor, sometimes you can see a sound wave indicated on a graph, and that means that somebody is not speaking. Whereas if you see that line at the top, that means that there's somebody talking and it's modulating up and down. Sometimes it's louder and other times it's lower, but you see it either ascends or descends from the baseline. And the baseline can be represented by a straight line, and that's generally something that everything rests on. Like when you learn how to write, you write on a baseline. That's why sheets of paper are lined so that you can get your letters orderly and adhere to that line in a cohesive and orderly fashion. Now, the second element of design is color. And that's important, you know, for many, many years in visual art, we were able to render things in color. Cavemen started mixing pigments to reflect colors that he saw in nature. In early cave paintings, they would mix plants and in some cases dyes made from animal blood to get red or blue, and they used that to color their paintings. And so we did throughout our evolution as visual artists. And then when we moved into television and movies before television, for a long time, we were not able to render things in color. So you had black and white images. And then lo and behold, when they were able to come up with the process to have color photography or even color motion picture video, film, then that brought a whole new element. I'm reminded in one of the early uses of color in The Wizard of Oz, early on in the movie, Dorothy in Kansas, to indicate how dreary and uninteresting Kansas was. That beginning of the movie was in black and white. But then when she landed in Oz, all of a sudden the movie went to color to indicate that this was a world with much more dimension than the world at which she came from, because it was vibrant and alive with color. So that was a way that they used the new medium of color film to create a sense of awe and wonder at the city and the land of Oz, or the land beyond the yellow brick road, which was so different from Kansas, which was all in black and white. So color, over the years, we have come to divide colors into what we call the color wheel. And you can see these letters around the diameter of this wheel. The P represents primary colors, the S is a secondary color, and the T is a tertiary color. Now, what you do with primary colors, if you mix primary colors with other colors, then you can create all the secondary and tertiary colors. Like a primary color is yellow. Another primary color is red, and the third primary color is blue. So by combining red, yellow, or blue together, you can come up with the tertiary or secondary colors. Like for instance, if you combine yellow with blue, then you get the color green. If you combine yellow with red, then you get the color orange. And if you combine red and blue, I already said that, you get red and, which one am I missing? Red and blue, you get purple. Red and blue, you get purple. And then, of course, blue and yellow, you get green. And then you can get the tertiary or the third level of color by combining some of the secondary colors with other secondary colors, and you get those colors in between. Also on the color wheel, you see what are called neutral colors, when technically they aren't colors at all. They are actually shades, but we call them color for the purpose of putting them on the color wheel. And that's white, black, and of course, if you combine white and black, you get gray, and then brown is the color that comes when you mix all the primary and tertiary colors together in different levels, well, all the primary colors, and you're going to come up with color brown. So that's, or you can increase the brightness and the hue of a color by adding, if you add white to a color, then you get a tint. And if you add black or different levels of black, you can reduce the brightness or vibrance of that color. Now, on the color wheel, you have what are called the complementary colors. And complementary colors are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel, like yellow and purple. Even though they're opposite each other, they're complementary in that they go good together. They look good together, because in some way you might think colors opposite each other on the color wheel are contrasting colors, and they are, but they tend to be complementary. So therefore, you find a lot of football teams and sororities, they take complementary colors like purple and yellow. That's the color of the Minnesota Vikings, or the Omegas if you're talking about college colors. Sororities and fraternities do that. Or you take red and green, those are the Christmas colors. When you see red and green together, you think Christmas. And you got complementary colors are blue and orange, and colors, and I will not speak their name here, but these complementary colors are used to create a sense of harmony and something that's pleasing to the eye. So these colors complement each other. Now, you also have on the color wheel analogous colors, and these are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So you got yellow, you got yellow, orange, and orange, because if you combine yellow and orange, then you get, well, of course, you combine yellow and red, you get orange, because if you notice, orange is the color that's right in the middle of yellow and red. But then if you combine a little more yellow with orange, then you're going to get yellow-orange, which is a little more, or pumpkin color, so to speak. And so these are analogous colors. You got yellow and pumpkin and orange, and those are called analogous colors. And the same thing with violet, purple, and blue. You know, those are analogous colors. So you can use those colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. You can even get green and Kelly green and blue. Even though you're using green and blue, if you use those three colors that are right next to each other, then you're going to come up with something that's harmonious, because they are next to each other on the color wheel. Now, the next element of design is shape. And again, that's one of the basic elements of design, in that after drawing lines, then your caveman or early man then started taking these lines and making shapes with them to represent things that he saw in his environment around him. And so shapes are basically three types of shapes. You got geometric shapes, and they're called geometric shapes because they are composed of angles that you can actually use in a mathematical way, in a way that we call geometry, because they're composed of right angles and circles and triangles. And these are your geometric shapes. And geometric shapes are kind of basic. And in art, you can take geometric shapes and really create almost anything just using geometric shapes, whether it be a square or a circle to indicate a head, or a square. You could elongate it into a rectangle and indicate something like the arms or limbs or legs of a person. And the same thing with triangle. Those are some basic shapes. And the second type of shape are organic or natural shapes. And these are shapes that represent things in nature, things that tend not to be geometric, because we rarely see things in a geometrical pattern in nature, or something organic. Like you don't see a perfectly triangular squash, and even a watermelon, even though it's circular, it's going to be oblong. It's not going to be a perfect circle. So you got clouds, you got leaves, and you got rocks. Those are organic or natural shapes. Third type of shape is an abstract shape. Now, an abstract shape is something that is made to represent something that's a lot more complicated, but you reduce it to its basic parameters, to its most elemental form, and it becomes abstract or iconic. And so we see these are icons that we see today, and you instantly know what they are, even though they don't perfectly represent the things that they're meant to represent. Like that first shape, it indicates in computer connectivity, whether it be charging your iPod or your phone. That indicates something with a USB port, and you're able to charge it, connect it via a cable. The center shape is an icon or an abstract image that is used to represent a human being. So that, in this case, a man. Although you can make some very rudimentary changes to this and convert that basic shape into a woman just by dropping the hemline and making it look like the body has on a skirt. And then you throw a little hair around the head, and that can instantly go from being a representation of a man to represent a woman. So that's an iconic or abstract shape. And thirdly, you've got this indicating a wave or an electronic or a sound wave or an electronic wave. In this case, it represents Wi-Fi connectivity. So if you pass by an establishment and they got this on the front door and outside, they got free Wi-Fi. So this is an abstract shape that you see, and you instantly know what this is trying to convey, is that we're connected, we got free Wi-Fi, come on in and take a seat. We're not gonna run you out. You can just chill and make use of our free Wi-Fi, because people found out that the longer somebody sits in a restaurant or a place like that, the more likely they are to spend money. So they start providing free Wi-Fi to people. Now, the fourth element of design that we're going to explore today is the element of space. And that word space has really come to mean, in most people's mind, when you see that, you think of like the old television series Star Trek. I mean, that was the first word Captain Kirk said: space, the final frontier, And so when you think of space, you think of emptiness, something that has nothing in it, although we know that space is actually full of planets and galaxies and suns and comets and asteroids. But space is so huge and so vast that there's a lot of space between objects, and so we tend to think of space as being empty. Okay, and so you have microspace. Microspace is the smaller elements of white space within a design, like letters, words, or small objects. Okay? And then the opposite of microspace is macrospace. And this is the larger elements of white space, and it represents the negative space between large objects like paragraphs, shapes, or photos. For instance, we're going to investigate space in this way. You've got the letters, the FedEx letters here, and you see it's on a white background. But it takes a while for the average person to see the use of the negative space between the E and the X. That negative space is combined to create a positive space or the positive image of an arrow. And that subliminally indicates that's the way of the designer of the FedEx logo to make you know that FedEx is always moving. Because when you see an arrow, you know that it's something on the move, something that's being projected. So that indicates that FedEx is always on the move, moving one item from point A to point B. They're always in movement and they are always carrying your stuff. So that way the designer was able to indicate, even in the words FedEx, sort of the central mission of FedEx, which is to move your goods from point A to point B and to show that FedEx is on the move. This space right here, if you take this logo and suspend it over this background, man, it's kind of hard to see what you got going here. But if you throw in a white background, then you can see that's the USA logo, the USA network, cable network. In this case, the designer used a negative space between the U and the A to create the positive image of the S. So he's using that negative white space to make a positive, juxtaposed between the red U and the red A. You can see, not so easy to see here, but by putting over a white background, the contrast can show you that you got the USA logo, the USA cable network. Now here, the designer used the space in an innovative way. This is called a minimalist design, whereas you take your white space and with a minimum of shape, you indicate a kind of complex or central idea that you're trying to convey. In this case, this is an ad for a Tic Tac. So this red shape of the lips, he's able to use the white space on the red lips to create the positive image of a white Tic Tac, because that's the shape of a Tic Tac. So with just a splash of color, as actually that ad has only one color in it, because white again is not a color, it's a shade. But by using just that one red color, that one splash of red, he's able to convey that you put a Tic Tac in your mouth and something good is going to happen. So that's a use of white space in an innovative and minimalist way. And the same thing with this Notorious B.I.G. album, Ready to Die. You got, and this is the irony of using, you're thinking about Christopher Wallace, and if you know anything about Christopher Wallace, or better known as the Notorious B.I.G., he was a large guy. But they used his baby picture to indicate the notion that when he came into this world ready to die. And unfortunately, that proved to be prophetic, because I don't think Christopher Wallace lived to be 24 years old. So this simple design was able to convey the notion that the Notorious B.I.G., by using his baby picture, and the notion that even when he was little, before he became B.I.G., he was S-M-A-L-L, and he came into this world ready to die. Now, me personally, if I were designing this, I would probably place that baby in the corner to create some dynamic tension. But sometimes symmetry, or we'll come to symmetry later, sometimes you can achieve something symmetrical. But for me, I would have wanted a little more dynamic tension in this piece. So I probably would have shifted him to one corner, and maybe given those, instead of having Notorious B.I.G. Separated, I might have stacked them or made them juxtaposed or something like that. But there's nothing wrong with this, because sometimes it all depends on the preference of the designer. The next element of design is texture. Now, texture is an interesting element of design, because basically texture visually is hard to convey, because visually we know that texture is all based on the sense of touch. But because we grow up in a world that's composed of solid objects, we have come to understand that texture is something that is this tactile, something that you can feel. And so if you use texture, it can convey the notion of the actual object in real life. Like even this background that I'm using to present this over, this background has a texture. It looks like it's been scored with something, whether it be a needle or pockmarked or etching. You see that it has a texture. It gives you the feeling of something that's not flat or smooth. And the same thing with this texture. You can use this texture, this photograph or image of a wall, a weathered wall, a wall that had been cemented over. And we all know that it takes a while for a wall to go from flat cement until some of the cement falls away. So this texture gives you the impression of something that's deteriorated over time, something that's weather worn, something that suffered neglect. So in television, when I used to work in television as the art director, I would use a background like this and put some information on that maybe was talking about, you know, on Saturday, the Montgomery City Council is going to have a cleanup in Riverside or downtown, and if you're going to put the time and the date and the place by looking at this weathered, neglected stone wall, you understand that this is an area that has suffered neglect. So it's our prior experience with this texture that conveys a notion that visually would be otherwise hard to do. And again, if a person who can't see this texture, they won't get that feeling, because texture, again, is all based on a tactile feel. So when you see it visually, it translates that tactile sense of being able to touch something into a visual sense, but it's lost on a person who can't see. Now, conversely, a person who can't see, they develop Braille because a person can feel that, and they can understand how it might relate. And even with a textured wall, if a blind person is able to walk up to ground or a wall that looks like this, they can feel it. And they'll know that this is an uneven, rough surface. So texture is all about a tactile sense, or the ability to touch it and feel it. This background is a texture that's comprised of rhythmic and uniform punches or scoring into a metallic surface. And when you see something like this, you know it's been machine tools or artificial. It's man-made. Because even though a bear with his claws can make scratches, perpendicular or parallel lines like that, scratches, a bear is not going to be able to do it in such a rhythmic and uniform manner. So you know when you see something like this, it's something that's been manufactured or machine tooled. And so then that means that you're talking about something that's artificial. And so if you wanted to talk about a manufacturing plant, then you would use a background like this to give the impression or the notion that we're dealing with something that's man-made. The next element of design is typography. And typography is just a fancy way of saying type. You know, and we all know what typewriters are. And I know you guys on your phones, we always have a keypad where you can type letters. And so that's what typography relates to, letters and their shapes. Let's look at the Flash logo here. This is an advertisement for the TV series of Flash. Now, again, we talk about lines. These are irregular lines which indicate movement, and in the color, it represents electricity. And if you're talking about electricity and movement, you often think of lightning. So, you know, lightning travels fast. And so with the Flash, by using visual elements, in addition to the typeface or the typography that's being used, you get the notion that the Flash is on the move and he's moving fast, because you got an electric bolt in the middle that creates the dividing line in the A. You got the underscore, which is blurred on one end. And again, when you see something in a blur, you know it's moving faster than the eye can follow. And so And then the third element is the shape of the letters themselves. The letters are at an angle, and angles, again, like with the lines, instead of being straight lines, you got lines that are slanted, then that indicates movement, something in movement. So if the flash, if say for instance, if his name was the Stone, this would be an inappropriate use of the topography because stones don't move. So if he was called the Stone, you might typically would use a topography that indicates rock shapes or something that's sedentary or something that does not move, a block shape. Now, here we have the Godfather. Now, this topography was so successful and it became so ubiquitous that it actually evolved into a typeface called Godfather type. And this was something that was used in the original book to indicate an ancient organization. It's all black and white. And when you see something in black and white, that indicates that there's no ambiguity. There is no in between. Things are either black and white. In this case, things are either right or wrong. And we know that the mafia is unscrupulous. So that indicates that the Godfather, there is no grayness there. And by using, again, lines, straight lines connected from the hand of the puppeteer, it lets you know that the Godfather is pulling the strings of everything that's going on. So that's like the force behind the scenes. So this is an example of a very, very famous conservative typeface. As you can see, this typeface is very conservative. It looks like something from maybe the 1900s, which indicates it is something that's been around a long time. For instance, you wouldn't have set the Godfather type in a typeface that looked like something computer generated, because the Godfather was, I mean, the mafia was in existence long before computers were even made. So by using kind of an antique typeface like this, then you also get the notion that this is something that's conservative but old. This typeface is interesting in that it plays with the baseline. One of the things about elements of design is you understand the rules so you can break them when it suits your design purposes. Now, the Princess Bride was a movie about sword fighting and dragons and castles and knights and princesses. So you use a typeface that's kind of florid or flowery and got a lot of squiggles and curlicues, because that's something that was hand lettered. But the interesting thing about the Princess Bride is that this typeface is what's called an ambigram. And that means that this typeface, the words Princess Bride read the same thing upside down that they read right side up. This is this image, the same image that's just inverted. So, and the way you understand what this designer did was he played with the baseline. I talked about the baseline is the line that everything sits on when you start out lettering. We all know that the letters are supposed to fit on the line. A capital P does not descend below the line. A capital P is an ascender. But in this particular case, he took the capital P and dropped it so that it's a descender. And that way he was able to achieve this duality by making this an ambigram, which means it reads the same thing upside down as it does right side up. And there are some words that that read the same way left to right as they do right to left, backwards and forwards. Those are called palindromes. But I just wanted to show this example of toying with the baseline to make a point in this next image. This is an image from a program that used to come on VH1 when they showed R&B videos. It was called VH1 Soul. Now, because I understand that when rules are broken, usually a designer does not break a rule unless he's trying to achieve something. In this case, you look at it and you go, why would he have taken that S, the capital S, and connected it to the top of the O? Because that's not the way we learn how to print letters. And all of a sudden it jumped out at me. This is a woman on hands and knees, a pregnant woman on her hands and knees. And that is relating to the word soul, because soul is about nurturing, it's about nature, it's about feeling, and those are all female traits. Those are feminine traits. Women are nurturing, women are the backbone, or you talk about Mother Nature, and the miracle of life is about soul. So this jumped out at me one day, and I have never heard anybody say this, but because I'm a visual designer myself, I was able to see that. Now, some people, after I tell them that, they still don't see it. So for those of you who can't see it, there it is. You see a pregnant woman. This is a yoga exercise done by pregnant women to strengthen their backs. So you can see that the S is a stylized, again, iconic shape of her legs connecting to her butt or going up into her butt, and the O represents her pregnant belly, and the U are her hanging breasts. And then you go up into the L being her neck, and the loop in the L being her head shape, and then the rest of the L being her forearms. So this is an example of how this designer was able to take something and create a hidden icon in the word soul that even today, when I tell people about it, some of them look at me and go, oh, okay, where'd you get that from? But I got it from being able to see, and being a designer myself, I was able to see what the designer indicated. I didn't even know that this was an exercise that was done for pregnant women in yoga until a couple of days ago. I just Googled it. I said a woman on her hands and knees, and I got all these images of pregnant women performing this exercise in a yoga class. So that confirmed something I've suspected for many years. Okay, the next element of design is scale. And again, a scale is another another word for size. We're not talking about scales like on fish. We're talking about size scale. And scale is something that, again, it kind of, you can indicate scale by utilizing your negative and positive space. This is an ad for Volkswagens. And of course, as you probably all know, although they stopped making them, even though they came out with them again, I understand they've stopped making them again, but the Volkswagen Beetle was a car known for its small size. And the ad says, think small. So they were able to indicate the smallness of a Volkswagen Beetle by placing it up in one corner and use most of the space in the ad to shrink the size of the Beetle. If they had filled up the ad with a Beetle, then it would not have been able to convey to you visually that a Volkswagen is a small car, uses less gas, less compartment space, and it's an economical car. So this was a way to visually present this information in a way that your mind can readily accept and understand. Here's another example of using scale. McDonald's wanted to indicate that they serve breakfast from 5:30 a.m., even though they left the A out, to 8:15 p.m. Now, what they did here, not only did they exaggerate the size of the numbers, which let you know, okay, they serve breakfast from 5:30 to 8:15, but they also used the stylistic McDonald's logo to indicate the M in AM and PM. And so this is a sign of a designer playing with scale and iconography, the icon being the McDonald's logo, to indicate and convey the message that he's trying to get over. And again, color too. He's using these analogous colors of yellow and cherry orange or red. They're analogous colors so that they're next to each other on the color wheel. And the next element of design is dominance. And there is no right or wrong position for a dominant element, but the different impressions created by it should be understood. In other words, there's no right and wrong in where you make a dominant element, but understand why you want to make an element dominant. There are different reasons for making an element dominant. And using minimalism as in the prior Tic Tac logo or ad, But in this particular instance, we want to look at a photograph of some boats. And, you look at this image, and it's a pleasant enough image of some boats at a dock, overhead image of some boats at a dock, but there is no dynamic tension in it. So the image sort of is bland. But then if you make one of the boats dominant, like in this particular instance, then you create a little dynamic tension. Everything is not so symmetrical, but ironically, it makes the image more dynamic and then more pleasant because it's making one of the elements dominant as opposed to making all of the elements be about the same size, which is sort of boring and uninspiring. In addition to that, in the final analysis, the designer decided to change the color of the boat, which then made it dominant in that it doesn't conform to the basic analogous colors of blue, turquoise, green water. By making it red, it stands out even more. So by doing that, playing with the color and the size of the boat, it makes for a more pleasing overall picture. Then we got balance, and balance is, as we understand a balance beam, it's something that's distributed evenly. Like on a balance beam, to keep from falling, you want to make sure if you're walking on a tightrope, the key thing is to keep everything equal on both sides so that you don't flop to one side or the other. But in balance in visual design, you've got symmetry and you have asymmetry. Now in lexicon, in words, typically when you see a word, like if you see the word typical and you place an A in front of it, then something that's normal or usual, typical, becomes atypical. If you believe in God, you're called a theist. If you decide that you don't believe in God, then you are an atheist. If something is pathetic or something worthy of your sympathy, then if you don't care about something, then you are apathetic or apathetic. But you place an A in front of a word, like right now in the midst of this pandemic, we talk about people who are symptomatic because they are showing signs of having the virus. But if they don't show the signs of having the virus, then they're asymptomatic. And the same thing with symmetry. If something is symmetry is balanced and something is asymmetrical, or if you talk about asymmetry, then it's unbalanced. Like in this case, you've got symmetry with this example. This is a mirror image. They change the colors, but basically the shapes are mirrored. So it's balanced, it's a balanced shape. Now here we have something that's asymmetrical because we've got basically the same shapes, same colors, but they're not evenly divided. As a matter of fact, it's divided with a slanted line. And again, a slanted line as opposed to indicating something that's harmonious or something that is at rest with a straight line. If it's slanted, then it indicates movement or tension or dynamism. And so we have an asymmetrical design on the right. Now, another element of symmetry is called radial symmetry. And radial, anytime you see the word radial, it means something in a circle, like a radial tire or the radius of a circle. But radial symmetry is when you can achieve symmetry by moving something in a circular pattern around a central axis. And I will show you how you take that asymmetrical design in the prior example and you rotate it in the quadrants of a circle, then you come up with symmetry. By taking that completely asymmetrical shape and radiating it around the central axis of a circle, then you end up with something that's overall symmetrical, even though you're using asymmetrical elements. That's called radial symmetry. Now, the final element of design is harmony. And harmony is the main goal of visual design. And that's achieved by combining adjacent colors. In this case, you got yellow, orange, and red. Similar shapes, take these geometric and create something that's overall harmonious. And in some cases, you can even visually, it makes it look like you got some curved lines in there, even though everything is completely geometric. There are no curves in it at all. But visually, by playing with the colors and the arrangement of the colors, it kind of bends your eye. In some ways, you could swear, I can swear that was a curved line. No, no. Everything is geometrical. And then finally, if you take related textures, now that's like a hardwood floor. When you see a hardwood floor and it, the pattern is completely irregular, or in this case, when you talk about irregular, you talk about asymmetrical. No, the wood grain is, no two pieces of wood are alike. Wood grain is like fingerprints. The grain of a tree is like the fingerprints on your fingers, and they're never the same. They can be very similar, but they are not the same. So when you take all these asymmetrical or irregular shapes and combine them into a hardwood floor, they create an overall sense of balance and harmony because they have related textures. So that's why hardwood floors are so pleasing to the eye, because you can get an overall sense of harmony. In this particular image of a painting, the artist was able to create harmony by using the similar oval shapes and the similar colors, using black, gray, and white, and different tints and shades of black and white to create a harmonious design. In this particular instance, you're using those colors analogous to each other on the color wheel, red, orange, and yellow. And by using these warm colors, you get a sense of energy or something radiating. In addition to the squiggly shapes there, you got some movement. So you think of sunbeams or some kind of viral pattern or something in movement, something energetic. And in this final example here, we take some tires, something that could have been very boring and placid. And by intermingling them in this woven pattern here, if you kind of look at this and kind of take your eyes out of focus, it looks like a sweater pattern or some kind of herringbone pattern in a piece of fabric. And it looks organic. It looks like something that's woven, and it's rubber tires. But because they're all the same color and shades of gray, you know, you get an overall sense of harmony and unity in this. And so these are the elements of design that you're going to be asked to use in your final piece: line, color, shape, space, texture, topography, scale, dominance, balance, and harmony. And that's the presentation. And before I go, I'm going to give you an example of some of my work. Like I said, my dad was an art teacher, and I've been an artist all my life. And I've worked at WSFA television for 30 years, 22 years as the art director. So all these elements of design, I used them every day. And it doesn't make any difference whether I was designing a billboard or an ad for the sales department, or doing all the signage on all of the vehicles, or even doing the name badges. When they hired new employees, they sent them to my office and I took that picture and made a name badge. So I use that in everything I did at WSFA. I use these basic elements of design. Once you understand the basic elements of design, as I said, you know when to break the rules to achieve something that you want to accomplish. This piece is something recently I unveiled, 4 8-foot by 11-foot circular walls in the central atrium of the Montgomery Public Library downtown. These are people, natives of Montgomery, who've achieved some prominence in different fields. We got Jamichael Green, we got Chica Oranica, the rapper, the young rapper from Montgomery, Tony Tennille, who's a native of Montgomery, Mose T, the artist, of course, Hank Williams and Nat King Cole. We got Bart Starr, the quarterback. We got Catherine Thornton, the astronaut, and Tommy Shaw from Styx, Big Mama Thorne. We got Twitch from the Ellen Show. We got one of the original Temptations and Clarence Carter. So, you know, Montgomery, we got Eddie Floyd from Knock on Wood fame. So Montgomery has turned out some illustrious people. and baseball player Oscar Gamble. So this wall represents that, and it takes you through a chronological history of the city of Montgomery from its inception. Some of the other panels relate to different aspects of that. Now, this is a mural that I did. If you guys go to Trenholm, even though you don't go there physically, I guess, but this is the Rufus Lewis Library, which is at the base of Air Base Boulevard. This is a mural outside that depicts a combination of the anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott and the 60th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott and the 50th anniversary of the Selma Montgomery March. On the far right, you see Barack Obama when he came to march across the bridge. In the first panel, you see Martin Luther King when he led the movement to boycott the bus lines in the city of Montgomery. This is a recent design I did for the anniversary of Montgomery's 200th history, or the state's 200th. The state and the city were formed in the same year. And this design was something that I did, and it wrapped around the bus, and I had to kind of move some of the elements around to accommodate the windows and the doors. But this is the design as it was originally conceptualized. And as I said, it shows a chronological history of the state of Alabama from its inception. I'm sorry, not the state of Alabama, but the city of Montgomery. All these elements were elements from the city of Montgomery. Things that happened in the city of Montgomery, whether it be the formation of old Alabama town and New Philadelphia on the far right, there's General John Scott and Andrew Dexter, that Dexter Avenue is named after. The red eagle represents the last indigenous native leader who was his Indian name was Red Eagle. And so he's in there, and you got F. Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald and Rosa Parks, and again, Hank Williams and Nat King Cole, Martin Luther King, Octavia Spencer, Percy Julian. I particularly, as a music fan, I really like the fact that Nat King Cole and Hank Williams are both natives of Montgomery, and together they form really the background of popular music in America. Nat King Cole represented jazz and sophisticated R&B, and Hank Williams, of course, was basically the founder of country music as we know it today. And this design was used for the next to the last year we had Jubilee, and the central figures, I had to take them out because Janelle Monáe and Bruno Mars, primarily Janelle Monáe, wouldn't allow us to use her image. So I instead used the logo of the Jubilee City Fest instead of their images. This is a piece of conventional painting I did, acrylic on canvas, after I went and saw Malcolm X, the movie. Denzel Washington did a great job, but he was not red. As a person of color, we know what we mean when we say somebody's red. Their complexion is important, and Denzel Washington is not red. I redid that image. A buddy of mine who works at Alabama State liked it so much, so he wanted one for Alabama State's permanent collection. So this is a remake of that, so to speak. And then I even did a third version for my nephew who loved it so much until I painted him one too. This is a piece using fauvism. It's called fauvism, where you take unnatural colors to represent an abstract of a human being. And this piece is probably the oldest piece of my collection. I did that when I was like a freshman at Alabama State. So that piece is probably 50 years old. Wow. That's Diana Ross. It won third prize in a statewide competition for HBCUs. And this piece is the Selma to Montgomery 50th anniversary march that went around the world. This was a design for t-shirts, and we sold quite a few of these t-shirts in Selma that year. I wish we'd had 1,000 more because people were buying them like flapjacks. But that's just an example of some of the stuff I've done, and I'm continuing to work as a freelance artist in Montgomery. And that's the end of my presentation, and I'm available now. We got